The way humans treat animals has long been a reflection of their compassion, ethics, and moral values. In today's world, discussions about animal rights and welfare are often framed as modern concerns. But over 1,400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad set an extraordinary example of kindness and respect toward animals. His teachings, deeply rooted in Islam, emphasize that all living beings are part of God's creation and deserve care, dignity, and protection. While many know him as a leader, a statesman, and a messenger of God, fewer are aware of how profoundly he advocated for the well-being of animals. Islam, as a religion, does not regard animals as lesser creatures to be used and discarded at human convenience. Instead, they are seen as communities just like humans, each with their own purpose and significance in the balance of life. The Quran states that animals, too, glorify God in their own way, even if humans cannot perceive it. This perspective forms the foundation of Islamic teachings on animal welfare, making it a moral responsibility for believers to treat animals with kindness and mercy. Prophet Muhammad embodied these principles not just in his words, but also in his daily actions, demonstrating a level of empathy that was revolutionary for his time. There are many instances from his life that showcase his deep love for animals. He intervened when he saw mistreatment, educated his followers on the importance of kindness toward animals, and set rules that ensured animals were not subjected to cruelty. His concern was not just limited to domesticated animals like camels, horses, and cats, but extended to birds, wild animals, and even insects. His teachings were so clear and emphatic that they laid the foundation for many of the ethical principles in Islamic jurisprudence concerning animals. Despite these teachings, there are still misconceptions about how Islam views animals. Some assume that religious traditions do not prioritize animal welfare, while others believe that using animals for work, food, or companionship means their rights are secondary. However, the example set by Prophet Muhammad reveals a different reality, one where kindness to animals is directly linked to human morality and righteousness. In fact, he taught that mistreating animals could lead to divine punishment, while showing compassion could earn a person God's mercy and even a place in paradise. The teachings of the Prophet are not just historical anecdotes, but valuable lessons for today's world. Whether it is about treating pets with care, ensuring ethical farming practices, or protecting wildlife, his guidance remains relevant. Understanding how Prophet Muhammad approached the treatment of animals offers insights into how humanity can create a more compassionate and just society, one where all living beings are valued and protected. In Islam, animals are not seen as mere creatures to be used at human convenience, but rather as beings created by God with their own purpose and rights. The Quran repeatedly acknowledges the importance of animals, emphasizing that they are communities just like humans, each with its own unique role in the balance of nature. This perspective places a moral responsibility on humans to ensure their welfare, recognizing that they, too, are part of God's divine creation. Unlike the view that animals exist solely for human benefit, Islam teaches that they have intrinsic value, and their suffering or well-being matters in the eyes of God. One of the most profound verses in the Quran states that all creatures on earth, whether they walk, fly, or crawl, are part of God's design and are held in His care. This reinforces the idea that animals are not simply resources for human use, but are also part of the greater order of existence. Many verses speak of animals with reverence, highlighting their roles in the world and the lessons humans can learn from them. For instance, the Quran mentions ants communicating, birds displaying intelligence, and bees producing honey with divine guidance, all of which serve as reminders of God's wisdom in nature. Prophet Muhammad's teachings align perfectly with these Quranic principles, demonstrating deep respect and compassion for animals in his daily life. He often reminded his followers that animals were not objects but living beings with feelings, needs, and emotions. He spoke of animals as part of the natural balance that humans must not disrupt unjustly. He emphasized that animals should be treated with the same care and respect given to any member of one's household, ensuring they are well-fed, protected, and not overworked. This responsibility toward animals was not seen as optional, but as a duty, a sacred trust given to humans by God. One of the key principles in Islam is the idea of stewardship, where humans are entrusted with the care of the earth and all its inhabitants. This includes treating animals ethically, ensuring their well-being, and refraining from actions that cause them unnecessary pain or suffering. Prophet Muhammad warned against neglecting or mistreating animals, making it clear that such actions would not go unnoticed by God. He once told the story of a woman who was condemned to hell because she had locked up a cat without providing food or water until it died. Conversely, he also spoke of a man who was forgiven by God simply because he showed mercy to a thirsty dog by giving it water. These stories highlight how deeply acts of kindness or cruelty toward animals can impact one's spiritual standing. Beyond individual acts of kindness, Islam provides clear guidance on how animals should be treated in daily life. Domesticated animals, such as camels, horses, and donkeys, were commonly used for transportation and labor in the Prophet's time. However, he instructed his followers to never overburden them, strike them harshly, or deprive them of food and rest. He once saw a man sharpening his knife in front of a sheep he was about to slaughter and immediately intervened, reminding the man that the animal should not have to endure fear and suffering before its death. Even in matters of necessity, such as using animals for work or food, the Prophet insisted on the highest level of care and consideration. Wild animals, too, were not to be hunted for sport or amusement. Islam discourages killing animals without just cause, and Prophet Muhammad specifically warned against harming creatures without necessity. He expressed strong disapproval of people who treated birds and other creatures as mere playthings, once chastising a group of men who had captured baby birds, causing distress to their mother. His reaction underscores the belief that animals, just like humans, have emotions and experience pain and distress. The Prophet's concern for animal welfare extended even to insects. He spoke against burning anthills, reminding his followers that even the smallest creatures have a purpose in God's creation. This level of compassion and awareness was rare in an era when animals were often viewed solely as tools for human survival. His teachings revolutionized the way people thought about the rights of all living beings, reinforcing that kindness toward animals is a form of worship and a reflection of one's faith. Even today, these teachings provide invaluable lessons in how society should approach animal welfare. The modern world presents many challenges, from factory farming to deforestation and habitat destruction, all of which threaten animal lives. The Prophet's message remains relevant, urging humans to recognize their responsibility in protecting animals and treating them with kindness. His words and actions serve as a powerful reminder that animals are not commodities, but beings deserving of respect and compassion. By embracing these principles, people can foster a more ethical and humane world, one that honors the sacred trust given to humanity in caring for all creatures. Prophet Muhammad's love and compassion for animals were not mere expressions of kindness, but a deeply ingrained part of his character and teachings. He did not see animals as lesser beings, nor did he consider their suffering insignificant. Instead, he treated them with remarkable gentleness, empathy, and care, setting an example for his followers and for future generations. His interactions with animals reflected his broader philosophy of mercy, which extended to all of God's creation, whether human or non-human. One of the most well-known accounts of his compassion involves a thirsty dog. A man once came across a dog panting heavily from thirst. Realizing the animal was suffering, he climbed into a well, filled his shoe with water, and gave it to the dog. Prophet Muhammad later told his companions that God had forgiven the man's sins because of this single act of kindness. This story illustrates how the Prophet viewed even small acts of mercy as immensely valuable, enough to earn divine reward. It also conveys that animals experience pain and distress just as humans do, and alleviating their suffering is a virtuous deed. The Prophet did not restrict such mercy to only specific animals. Instead, he emphasized that every creature deserved compassion. His concern for animals was evident in his everyday life. On one occasion, he saw a man preparing to slaughter a sheep, but doing so in an inhumane manner. The man was sharpening his knife in front of the animal, causing it unnecessary fear and distress. The Prophet immediately intervened, reminding the man that he should have sharpened his knife beforehand and not in the presence of the sheep. He emphasized that even in matters of necessity, such as slaughtering for food, animals should be treated with respect and should not suffer needlessly. This level of consideration was unprecedented in an era when animals were often viewed as little more than property. Beyond ensuring animals were not harmed, the Prophet also actively condemned those who mistreated them. He once spoke of a woman who had been punished by God for imprisoning a cat. She neither fed it nor allowed it to find food on its own, and as a result, the cat died. Because of her cruelty, she was condemned. This powerful warning served as a reminder that mistreatment of animals is a serious offense in the eyes of God. Conversely, the Prophet taught that caring for animals could be a path to divine mercy, demonstrating that kindness to animals is not merely an ethical choice, but a religious obligation. His love for animals was not limited to acts of mercy in moments of suffering. He also showed deep respect for their well-being in everyday situations. One day, as he and his companions were traveling, they came across a bird's nest with baby chicks inside. Someone took the chicks, and the mother bird, visibly distressed, began flapping her wings frantically. The Prophet immediately noticed and asked who had taken the chicks. When the person admitted to it, he instructed them to return the chicks to their mother, stating that causing distress to animals, even unintentionally, was wrong. His ability to empathize with the pain of a mother bird shows how deeply he understood the emotions of living beings. Another touching story involves a cat. The Prophet had a cat named Muetza, and it is said that one day while he was preparing for prayer, the cat was sleeping on his robe. Rather than disturb the cat, he carefully cut the fabric around it so that it could continue resting undisturbed. This simple yet profound act of kindness illustrates his gentle nature and his unwillingness to inconvenience an animal, even in the smallest of ways. His relationship with animals was not based on dominance but on care and mutual respect. His concern also extended to working animals. Camels and horses were commonly used for transport and labor in his time, and he frequently reminded his followers to treat them well. He once came across a camel that appeared weak and malnourished, and upon inquiry, he found that its owner had overworked it without providing sufficient food. The Prophet rebuked the man, emphasizing that animals should never be burdened beyond their capacity and that they must be fed properly. He taught that animals, just like humans, had rights, and those who depended on them for work or travel were responsible for their welfare. Hunting for sport was another practice he disapproved of. While he permitted hunting for food, he strongly opposed killing animals merely for pleasure. He warned against taking the lives of animals unnecessarily and condemned those who inflicted suffering on them for entertainment. Once, he saw some men using birds as targets for their arrows. He was deeply saddened by this and instructed them to stop, emphasizing that animals should not be treated as objects of amusement. This principle remains relevant even today, where many forms of animal cruelty occur under the guise of entertainment. His teachings and actions made it clear that kindness to animals was not optional, but a reflection of one's faith and character. He viewed mercy toward animals as a direct path to divine reward and mistreatment as a sin that could bring about punishment. His unwavering commitment to animal welfare set a precedent for his followers, urging them to see animals not as mere tools or commodities, but as fellow creations deserving of love and care. The lessons drawn from the Prophet's life are as relevant today as they were over 1,000 years ago. In a world where animals are often subjected to neglect, abuse, and exploitation, His teachings serve as a powerful reminder of the responsibility humans hold. Whether it is in caring for pets, ensuring humane treatment of farm animals, or protecting wildlife, his message remains timeless. His love and compassion for animals were not just personal traits but integral parts of his moral and spiritual guidance, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire kindness and respect for all living beings. Prophet Muhammad's teachings on the ethical treatment of animals were not abstract ideals but practical guidelines that could be implemented in daily life. His approach was rooted in the belief that animals, like humans, are living beings created by God and therefore deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. He emphasized that animals should be fed properly, allowed to rest, and never subjected to unnecessary suffering. His teachings created a framework that ensured humane treatment of animals in various aspects of life, from domestic care to work, travel, and even food consumption. One of the most important principles he taught was that providing food and water to animals was not only an act of kindness, but also an act of worship. He frequently reminded his followers that animals experience hunger, thirst, and pain, just as humans do. He once told his companions about a man who entered paradise simply because he gave water to a thirsty dog, and conversely, he spoke of a woman who was punished because she starved a cat to death. These stories served as a moral compass, reinforcing that how people treat animals directly reflects their own character and faith. He encouraged his followers to be attentive to the needs of animals, to ensure that they had access to clean food and water, and to never withhold sustenance from them. Beyond providing food and water, he also taught that animals should not be burdened beyond their capacity. In his time, animals such as camels, horses, and donkeys were commonly used for transportation and carrying loads. While he acknowledged their role in human society, he made it clear that their treatment must be fair and humane. He once saw a man overburdening his camel and spoke out against it, warning that excessive strain on an animal was a form of cruelty. On another occasion, he observed a donkey that had been branded on its face, a common practice at the time, and strongly condemned it. He instructed his followers never to strike animals in the face, recognizing that such actions caused unnecessary pain. His insistence on humane treatment extended to ensuring that working animals received proper rest, food, and medical attention. If an animal was ill or weak, it was not to be forced to work. And if a person depended on an animal for their livelihood, they had a duty to care for it, as they would a trusted companion. Companionship with animals was also an area where he set an example of kindness. He treated animals with love, whether they were work animals or household pets. Cats, in particular, were animals he showed great affection toward, and his companions followed his example. There are numerous accounts of his interactions with cats, including the famous story of how he let a cat continue sleeping on his robe rather than disturb it. His attitude toward pets was one of gentle care, emphasizing that if someone took responsibility for an animal, they must provide for it fully. Abandoning an animal or neglecting its needs was not acceptable. His teachings also extended to wildlife and birds. He spoke against capturing birds unnecessarily, noting that a mother bird should not be separated from her young. He once saw a group of people who had taken baby chicks from a nest, and when the distressed mother bird began circling in panic, he instructed them to return the chicks immediately. He also discouraged hunting animals for sport. While he allowed hunting for food when necessary, he condemned killing animals for pleasure or amusement. He once saw men using live birds as targets for archery practice and ordered them to stop, reminding them that such actions were cruel and served no purpose. Even in matters of slaughtering animals for food, he insisted on humane treatment. He taught that if an animal was to be slaughtered, it should be done as quickly and painlessly as possible. He emphasized that a sharp knife should be used to minimize suffering, and that the knife should never be sharpened in front of the animal. He once reprimanded a man who was preparing to slaughter a sheep while letting another sheep watch, stating that such insensitivity was unnecessary and cruel. His approach to slaughter was deeply humane, ensuring that the process was carried out with the utmost respect for the animal's life. Another important teaching was the prohibition of keeping animals in distress for human amusement. He strongly opposed chaining or caging animals in ways that restricted their movement and caused them suffering. He believed that animals should be allowed to live freely whenever possible, and that their natural behaviors should not be hindered for human convenience. If an animal was to be kept, it had to be cared for properly, with adequate space, food, and social interaction. His concern for animals was not limited to words. He actively demonstrated these values in his own life. He regularly checked on animals in his community, inquired about their conditions, and intervened when he saw mistreatment. He did not view compassion toward animals as a secondary virtue, but as an essential part of being a good and righteous person. His teachings created a legacy that influenced Islamic laws on animal welfare, many of which continue to be followed today. In the modern world, where factory farming, deforestation, and climate change threaten the well-being of animals, his teachings serve as an urgent reminder that humans have a responsibility to treat animals ethically. His message was not simply about avoiding cruelty, but about fostering a culture of care and empathy. By applying his principles to contemporary issues, from ensuring humane conditions in food production to advocating against animal cruelty in entertainment and sport, people can uphold his legacy in meaningful ways. His emphasis on ethical treatment was not just a call for kindness, but a fundamental reflection of faith. In his view, mercy toward animals was an extension of one's relationship with God, and a person's treatment of the weakest creatures was a test of their character. Whether in providing food and water, treating working animals with fairness, or ensuring humane practices in slaughter, his teachings remain profoundly relevant. His approach serves as a timeless reminder that animals are not mere possessions, but sentient beings that deserve care, compassion, and respect. Through his example, he taught that kindness toward animals is not only a moral obligation, but a means of attaining God's mercy and blessings. Prophet Muhammad's stance on animal cruelty was unequivocal. He strongly condemned any form of harm, mistreatment, or neglect toward animals. His teachings and actions made it clear that animals, like humans, are part of God's creation and deserve to be treated with respect, kindness, and dignity. He did not view animals as mere resources for human use, but rather as living beings with their own needs, emotions, and rights. His deep concern for their well-being was reflected in the numerous occasions where he spoke against cruelty and injustice toward them. One of the strongest warnings he gave was about the consequences of mistreating animals. He once told his companions the story of a woman who was condemned to hell because she had imprisoned a cat, neither feeding it nor letting it go free to find food. The cat eventually died from starvation, and as a result, she was punished severely. This story was not just a cautionary tale, but a declaration that cruelty toward animals is a serious offense in the eyes of God. It emphasized that mistreating an animal is not a trivial matter, but a moral and spiritual failing that could lead to divine punishment. In contrast, he also spoke of a man who was forgiven his sins simply because he gave water to a thirsty dog, showing that even small acts of kindness toward animals could lead to immense rewards. Beyond individual acts of neglect, he also forbade practices that caused unnecessary suffering to animals. He strongly opposed overburdening working animals, reminding people that they should be treated with care and not exploited for their labor. He once saw a camel that was extremely thin and weak due to overwork and lack of proper nourishment. Deeply saddened, he chastised the owner for his negligence and instructed him to feed and care for the animal properly. On another occasion, he warned that animals should never be kept hungry or thirsty, as they too feel pain and distress. His words made it clear that the well-being of animals was not just a matter of ethical responsibility, but also a religious duty. He also prohibited striking animals in the face, recognizing that such actions were both painful and degrading. It was common at the time for people to hit or brand animals on their faces, often marking them as property. He condemned this practice and ordered that if animals needed to be marked for identification, it should be done in a way that did not cause unnecessary suffering. His sensitivity to the pain of animals extended even to insects. He once saw a group of people burning an anthill and immediately told them to stop, reminding them that all creatures have a purpose in God's creation and should not be harmed needlessly. Hunting and killing animals for sport was another practice he opposed. While he allowed hunting for food when necessary, he made it clear that killing for entertainment was unacceptable. He once saw a group of men using birds as targets for archery practice and became visibly upset. He rebuked them for causing suffering to the birds simply for their amusement, making it clear that life should never be taken without necessity. He emphasized that animals should not be treated as objects for human pleasure, but as beings that deserve to live without fear and suffering. His teachings reflected an advanced understanding of animal welfare, one that resonates even today in discussions about ethical hunting and conservation. The Prophet also spoke against using animals for violent forms of entertainment. He was deeply disturbed by activities like dogfighting and cockfighting, which involved forcing animals to battle each other for human amusement. He saw these practices as cruel and senseless, as they caused unnecessary pain and suffering. His prohibition of such activities was ahead of its time, considering that they continued for centuries in many societies. His message remains relevant today, as such forms of animal cruelty still persist in different parts of the world. Even in situations where animals were to be used for food, he insisted on minimizing their suffering. He taught that if an animal was to be slaughtered, it should be done in the most humane way possible. The knife should be sharp to ensure a quick and painless death, and it should never be sharpened in front of the animal to prevent fear and distress. He once saw a man preparing to slaughter a sheep while another sheep watched, and he immediately intervened, instructing the man to move the second sheep away so it would not experience unnecessary fear. This level of empathy toward animals was revolutionary for his time and continues to set a standard for ethical treatment in modern food industries. His concern for animals extended to the way they were housed and cared for. He discouraged keeping animals in cramped and uncomfortable spaces, believing that they should be given adequate room to move, rest, and live in a natural way. He emphasized that if people chose to keep animals, whether for companionship, labor, or food production, they had a moral responsibility to ensure their comfort and well-being. Abandoning an animal or neglecting its needs was not only irresponsible, but also a form of cruelty that could lead to divine punishment. His teachings created a strong foundation for animal rights in Islamic tradition. Over the centuries, Islamic scholars and rulers incorporated his principles into laws that protected animals from mistreatment. Many historical Islamic societies built shelters for stray animals, provided public water sources for them, and even established regulations to prevent overworking and abusing animals in marketplaces and farms. His legacy of compassion continues to inspire people today to advocate for better treatment of animals and to recognize that their lives have value beyond human utility. In modern times, the Prophet's teachings on animal cruelty remain profoundly relevant. With industrial farming, habitat destruction, and other human activities causing immense suffering to animals, his message serves as a powerful reminder of the responsibility humans have in caring for God's creatures. His insistence on mercy and kindness toward animals challenges people to reevaluate how they interact with the animal world, whether through personal choices, laws, or societal norms. His teachings encourage a deeper awareness of the ethical implications of human actions, urging people to move beyond seeing animals as commodities and instead as beings worthy of compassion and respect. His stance on animal cruelty was not just about avoiding harm, but about fostering a culture of empathy, care, and responsibility. He taught that mercy toward animals is a reflection of one's faith and character, and that those who are kind to animals will receive God's kindness in return. Through his example, he set a standard of ethical treatment that transcends time, reminding humanity that kindness to animals is not just an act of goodness, but a fundamental part of being a just and righteous person. His words and actions continue to inspire people around the world to uphold the principles of mercy and respect for all living beings. Islam provides clear guidance on the ethical treatment of animals used for work, emphasizing that while they can be used to assist humans, their well-being must always be prioritized. Prophet Muhammad consistently taught that animals should never be overburdened, mistreated, or deprived of their basic needs. In his time, animals such as camels, horses, and donkeys were commonly used for transportation and labor, yet he insisted that their rights be respected. He understood that these animals played an essential role in society, but he also reminded his followers that they were living beings with feelings, deserving of care and consideration. One of the key principles he emphasized was that animals should never be given loads too heavy for them to carry. He once saw a man overloading his camel to the point of exhaustion and immediately intervened, warning that such treatment was a form of oppression. He reminded his followers that animals, like humans, experience fatigue and pain, and it was unjust to exploit them beyond their natural capacity. His teachings made it clear that people who depended on animals for work had a moral and religious duty to ensure their comfort and well-being. If an animal showed signs of distress, it was the responsibility of its owner to reduce its burden, provide rest, and attend to its needs. Another important lesson he taught was the need to provide adequate food and water for working animals. He emphasized that animals should not be expected to perform tasks while hungry or dehydrated. On one occasion, he saw a thin and weak camel struggling to carry its load and expressed his sorrow, admonishing its owner for neglecting it. He instructed that animals should always be properly fed and given enough water to sustain them throughout their work. Neglecting these basic needs was not only a form of cruelty, but also a sin that would be held accountable in the hereafter. In addition to food and water, he also stressed the importance of allowing animals sufficient rest. He discouraged keeping animals standing for long hours without breaks and made it clear that they should not be forced to work under harsh conditions. He once entered a garden and saw a camel lying on the ground, groaning in exhaustion. Moved by its suffering, he went to it, patted it gently, and consoled it before addressing its owner. He rebuked the man for overworking the animal and instructed him to show kindness and consideration. This incident demonstrated his deep empathy toward animals and his commitment to ensuring their fair treatment. Prophet Muhammad also spoke against harming animals physically. He strongly opposed hitting or striking animals, particularly on their faces, as it was both painful and degrading. In his time, it was common for people to beat animals to make them move faster or to discipline them, but he condemned this practice. He reminded his followers that animals should not be treated harshly, and that even in training or guiding them, one should use gentle methods. He also disapproved of branding animals on their faces, which was a common practice for marking ownership. He found it cruel and unnecessary, advising people to find alternative ways to identify their animals that did not inflict pain. Another area where he provided guidance was in the fair use of animals for transportation. While he permitted people to ride camels, horses, and donkeys, he cautioned them against sitting on animals for prolonged periods when they were not in motion. He explained that animals were not meant to be treated as chairs, and that once they had completed their journey, they should be given time to rest. This teaching reinforced the idea that animals should be valued for more than their utility and should be treated with respect. His compassion extended to animals even when they had served their purpose. He advised people to allow older or weaker animals to retire rather than force them to continue working beyond their capacity. If an animal was no longer able to work, it was still deserving of care and should not simply be abandoned or left to suffer. His teachings emphasized that kindness to animals was not based on their usefulness, but rather on their intrinsic value as part of God's creation. In the modern world, his teachings remain profoundly relevant. Today, many animals continue to be used for labor, transportation, and agriculture. But in many cases, they are subjected to harsh conditions, overwork, and neglect. His guidance serves as a powerful reminder that human progress should never come at the cost of cruelty. Whether it is ensuring humane treatment of farm animals, protecting working animals from exploitation, or advocating for better living conditions, His message encourages a compassionate approach to the way animals are used in society. His teachings on the ethical use of animals set a standard of justice, mercy, and responsibility. He made it clear that animals are not mere tools for human benefit, but sentient beings that deserve dignity and care. By following his guidance, people can create a world where animals are not only valued for their contributions, but also protected from harm, ensuring that their treatment aligns with the principles of kindness and fairness that he championed throughout his life. Islamic teachings on animal slaughter emphasize not only dietary laws, but also the ethical treatment of animals before, during, and after the process. Prophet Muhammad made it clear that while animals could be used for food, their lives must be taken with the utmost care, compassion, and respect. He introduced a humane approach to slaughter that ensured the least amount of suffering, and these principles continue to be central to Islamic dietary laws today. His emphasis was not merely on following ritualistic procedures, but on upholding mercy, recognizing that animals, like humans, experience fear and pain. One of the most fundamental principles he taught was that slaughter should be carried out swiftly and with minimal distress. He instructed that the knife used must be extremely sharp to ensure a quick and painless death. A dull or blunt blade could prolong the suffering of the animal, something he strongly discouraged. He once saw a man sharpening his knife in front of a sheep he was about to slaughter and immediately stopped him, explaining that the animal should not witness the preparation for its own death. The Prophet was deeply aware of the psychological state of animals and insisted that they should not experience unnecessary fear or distress. Another significant aspect of his teachings was that an animal should never be slaughtered in front of another. He believed that even though animals could not speak, they had awareness and emotions, and exposing them to the slaughter of their kind was inhumane. He made it clear that if multiple animals were to be slaughtered, they should be taken aside one by one, away from the sight of others. This approach was revolutionary for his time, as it acknowledged the emotional capacity of animals and sought to reduce their suffering as much as possible. He also emphasized the importance of treating the animal well before slaughter. This included providing it with food and water and ensuring that it was calm. He warned against dragging animals roughly to the place of slaughter or handling them aggressively. He once saw a man pulling an animal by its leg in a forceful manner and immediately advised him to be gentle. He explained that kindness should extend to all creatures, even in their final moments. His teachings made it clear that showing mercy to an animal before slaughter was not an act of weakness, but a reflection of faith and righteousness. One of the most notable aspects of halal slaughter is the requirement that God's name be mentioned before the act. This practice serves as a reminder that taking the life of an animal is not a trivial matter, but a responsibility that must be approached with reverence. The Prophet emphasized that animals should not be killed carelessly or for sport, but only for sustenance and necessity. By reciting God's name, the person performing the slaughter acknowledges that the animal's life is being taken with permission and gratitude, ensuring that the act is carried out with humility rather than cruelty. In addition to the method of slaughter, he also spoke about the conditions in which animals should be raised before they are used for food. He disapproved of factory-like conditions where animals were confined in small spaces, deprived of proper nutrition, or treated as mere commodities. He believed that animals should be allowed to live naturally and be raised with care. He once reminded his followers that even though animals were being used for human benefit, they were still God's creatures and should be treated with dignity throughout their lives. His teachings on animal slaughter extended beyond the act itself and into the broader ethics of consumption. He encouraged moderation in eating meat and discouraged excessive slaughter for personal indulgence. He reminded his followers that while eating meat was permissible, it should not lead to wastefulness or cruelty. He urged people to be mindful of their consumption and to recognize that every life taken for sustenance was a gift that should not be taken for granted. He emphasized gratitude and restraint, reinforcing the idea that ethical eating was part of spiritual consciousness. In modern times, his teachings on animal slaughter and halal ethics continue to hold significance. With industrialized farming and mass meat production, many animals are subjected to inhumane conditions and cruel methods of slaughter. The Prophet's approach provides a framework that ensures ethical treatment and reminds people that even in fulfilling dietary needs, there must be a commitment to compassion. His teachings encourage the rejection of unnecessary suffering and the promotion of humane and responsible consumption. His insistence on ethical slaughter was not just about following religious rituals, but about fostering a deep respect for life. By setting these guidelines, he established a humane way of obtaining food that balanced necessity with mercy. His message remains a timeless call to kindness, ensuring that animals are not only used responsibly, but are treated with the dignity and care they deserve until their final moments. Through his teachings, he provided a model of ethical consumption that continues to inspire those who seek a way of life that honors both sustenance and compassion. Prophet Muhammad's teachings on the treatment of animals are as relevant today as they were over 1,400 years ago. His message of kindness, responsibility, and ethical treatment serves as a reminder that animals are not merely resources for human use, but living beings that deserve care and respect. In a world where animal cruelty is prevalent in industries such as factory farming, entertainment, and deforestation, his teachings provide a moral framework that can guide modern society in building a more compassionate relationship with animals. One of the key lessons from his teachings is that animals have rights and humans have a responsibility to uphold them. He taught that neglecting or mistreating animals is a serious offense that can lead to divine punishment, while acts of kindness can bring great reward. This principle challenges the modern-day exploitation of animals, where they are often seen as mere commodities for food, clothing, and experimentation. His teachings encourage people to reconsider their choices and adopt ethical practices that prioritize the well-being of animals, whether in personal habits or larger industries. His guidance on the humane treatment of working animals is particularly relevant today, as millions of animals continue to be used in labor-intensive roles across the world. From horses and donkeys used in transportation to elephants forced into entertainment, many are subjected to overwork and abuse. His insistence on fair treatment, proper rest, and nourishment for working animals serves as a timeless ethical standard. His teachings encourage people to advocate for better conditions for animals in agriculture, tourism, and domestic settings, ensuring that they are not exploited or treated cruelly. His approach to food consumption also offers important lessons in sustainability and ethical eating. In a time when factory farming has led to severe environmental damage, habitat destruction, and widespread animal suffering, his teachings emphasize the importance of moderation and responsible consumption. He discouraged wastefulness and overindulgence, reminding people that eating meat should be a mindful choice rather than an act of excess. This wisdom can inspire modern societies to adopt more sustainable food practices, reduce food waste, and ensure that animals raised for consumption are treated with dignity. Beyond individual responsibility, his teachings call for a collective effort in creating a world that values animal welfare. They encourage communities to protect wildlife, preserve natural habitats, and ensure that animals are not harmed for sport or entertainment. In a world where deforestation and pollution threaten countless species, his message serves as a call to action for conservation and environmental protection. His lessons are not confined to religious practice, but extend to universal ethics that can be embraced by all. They challenge people to rethink their treatment of animals and encourage a shift toward greater compassion, responsibility, and awareness. By following his teachings, individuals and societies can create a more just and humane world where animals are not only protected but are treated with the respect and kindness they deserve. His example reminds humanity that kindness to animals is not just an act of charity, but a reflection of one's character and moral values, shaping a world where mercy and justice extend to all living beings. The teachings of Prophet Muhammad on the treatment of animals are a profound testament to his compassion, wisdom, and deep understanding of the natural world. His life demonstrated that mercy and kindness were not limited to human interactions, but extended to all living beings, including animals. He emphasized that animals are part of God's creation, possessing their own intrinsic value, emotions, and needs. His guidance was not only theoretical, but was reflected in his daily actions, where he consistently showed gentleness toward animals, rebuked those who mistreated them, and established clear ethical principles for their care. His teachings set a high moral standard that remains relevant in today's world, where animals are often subjected to cruelty, neglect, and exploitation. Whether it is the suffering of factory-farmed animals, the overworking of transport animals, or the destruction of wildlife habitats, modern society faces ethical dilemmas that can be addressed through his principles. His insistence on humane treatment, fair use, and ethical consumption serves as a guide for individuals, communities, and industries to reassess their relationship with animals and ensure that their well-being is prioritized. The legacy he left behind is not just about rules and restrictions, but about fostering a culture of empathy and responsibility. His message was clear. Kindness to animals is not an optional virtue, but an essential part of faith and morality. He taught that acts of compassion, no matter how small, have great spiritual significance, while cruelty and neglect can lead to severe consequences. This wisdom remains timeless, reminding people that their treatment of animals is a reflection of their humanity. Applying his teachings today can lead to a world that values and respects all living beings. By adopting his principles, people can move toward a more just and compassionate society, where animals are not seen as mere commodities, but as fellow creatures deserving of care and dignity. His life serves as an enduring example of how faith and kindness can work together to create a world where mercy extends beyond humans, embracing every form of life. We hope this exploration of Prophet Muhammad's teachings on animals has inspired you to embrace compassion and kindness in all aspects of life. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on Islamic wisdom and guidance. Until next time, may peace and blessings be with you.